Welcome to Pointless Rewind, where I'm going to be doing a blind playthrough of Elden Ring. I love thinking about and talking about my experiences playing games in the moment, but there's no way in hell I'll ever be a streamer. I am too much of a solo gamer to make that into a social event. I also love critiquing and analyzing the crap out of video game levels, but there's no way in hell I'll ever do a game guide because I'm not very good at exploring every nook and cranny of an area. But you know what I am good at? Making stupid mistakes in video games, going in the wrong direction, fighting bosses with the wrong weapon, and dying repeatedly in hilariously stupid ways. So I thought that would actually be fun to narrate. And that's how we've arrived here at part 1 of my Inept walkthrough of Elden Ring. If you like this, please like and subscribe, and let me know what you think. Things start out with, obviously, a character creator, which I've already botched because I didn't capture any video, so you barely see what my character looks like. But I'm playing as a confessor, which is basically like the cleric of this world. And, of course, I have to give my tarnished a name.
What did you say your name was?
Vince Clortho, Keymaster of Gozer.
Yep, I'm going with Vince Clortho because if this is going to be a playthrough where I'm bumbling and fumbling and making mistakes left and right, then emulating Rick Moranis from Ghostbusters seems like an appropriate move. With that decided, it's time to move on and watch the intro video, which lays out basically what your character's goal is as a tarnished, which is more than I could say about the videos from the Souls games. Those I have no idea what I'm doing. It's just all thematically interesting and cool imagery. This, you at least have a goal. And while the goal of becoming the Elden Lord is ostensibly the main objective of this game, I have to say I'm more interested in meeting this guy.
The Loathsome Dung Eater.
Okay, dude, take it down a notch. You are introducing what is essentially a literal shit-eater. I don't think you need to have that kind of enthusiasm. Then again, I'm pretty excited to meet the Dung Eater eventually, but first, we gotta play the game. This journey begins in this church that could have been pulled directly from Bloodborne. It's dark, it's destroyed, there's a creepy statue behind me, there's a creepy humming sound that dissipates as you get further away from the statue. There's a dead body, it looks like a priestess in red, and she's got a blue glowing item on her. And look at that, it's a tarnished wizened finger. So was this lady tarnished, or did she kill a tarnished? Regardless of how she got it, something primal has been triggered inside of me, and that's the need to check every single thing in my inventory. I love doing this. The item descriptions in these games are amazing, and I kind of wish I made this a part of my morning routine. I feel like I would be more interested in routine things like brushing my teeth if I got to know my toothbrush a bit better. Though, do I really want to be brushing my teeth with a toothbrush that was once owned by the Loathsome Dung Eater? Or maybe I do, because as a Dung Eater, he would have very, very dirty teeth and would need the most powerful toothbrush in the history of the world. While I'm investigating that toothbrush, Vince Clortho starts looking at other items. Broadsword and shield are pretty standard, but even beyond that wizened finger, there are a ton of references to fingers. The catalyst for miracles is a finger seal. It was bestowed on Vince Clortho by a finger maiden, and the item descriptions on his apparel describe his church being found outside of the lands between and being dedicated to the teachings of the two fingers. And all the finger references kind of make sense. I mean, the game's called Elden Ring. The finger seal looks like it's engraved with a ring, so the only thing that would make more sense was if this game was called Elden Finger. Unfortunately, my miscues are not limited to bad jokes that had no chance of landing. I also forgot to examine the tarnished wizened finger, but there's no use fretting over that. It's time to leave the church. The first thing you see upon opening those doors is a giant castle in the distance and a incredibly large and glowing tree. And then the title card for the area pops up, and it's the Chapel of Anticipation. And I gotta say, I'm anticipating the story becoming a little bit more unique because I'm hoping that like the Elden Ring is kind of a metaphor for something else, that it's not actually a ring. I don't know, so much fantasy surrounds rings and giant eternal trees, and nothing is really new yet. And that extends to this area. Like, it's visually striking, and there are immediately mysteries like, how do you get through this locked door, and when do you get through this locked door? But it essentially feels like an amalgamation of Demon Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne. Now, this isn't negatively affecting my opinion of the game at this point at all, because even though this is a blind playthrough, I did read previews of the game, and I did read reviews of the game, and I do know some of what people are talking about, and I know that the jaw-dropping stuff is to come. They do momentarily fool me here. My first thought was that you're supposed to jump off of this spot to start the game proper. I was like, okay, it's like the Four Kings drop in Dark Souls, or the leap you have to make when you go to fight Rom, the vacuous spider in Bloodborne. Thankfully, I look around a little bit before jumping to my death and notice this staircase. So I walk down those stairs, and I realized the chapel is not so much destroyed as it's just fallen into disrepair. It just seems abandoned. I remember from the item descriptions that the church that Vince Clorthal hails from is found outside the Lands Between. Maybe this is part of that church, and they destroyed some of this stuff themselves in a way to defend themselves against the Lands Between. Man, so many questions, and I will answer approximately 0 of them. There's also been approximately 0 enemies so far, and I don't know why I'm getting Dark Souls tutorial vibes. It feels kind of like after you beat the Asylum Demon and you're going up that mountain, you just don't feel really at risk there. It's uneasy, but not like you're in danger. That's what I kind of feel like here. Now, my comparisons to that part of Dark Souls fall apart now because I'm fast approaching what's clearly a boss room. There's a bunch of statues outside. I have no idea who they are. But the one inside of this courtyard type area is definitely Marika, because that stance is shown dramatically in the intro video. I find it interesting that she's draped by what looks like a snake, because there was definitely some snake imagery in that intro video as well. As someone who is scared of snakes, this does not bode well, but I'm also scared of spiders, so this guy jumping down doesn't bode very well either. I wish this boss fight was better. Other than the Grafted Scion's design, this is pretty unmemorable. It pales in comparison to the first bosses in each of the Soulsborne games. Like, it ends in like 5 seconds, which is why I had to slow down this video. You don't get a chance to really get a feel for the Grafted Scion's attacks. Like, it just all awkwardly ends when he screams at you and the screen fades to black in a weird and stilted manner. Like, Vince Clorthal's health went down to 0, but he just sort of moonwalked and then, I don't know, vanished? But as much as I'd like to complain some more about how dull this initial boss fight is, gotta talk about this soggy cave/mausoleum. Vince Clorthal wakes up here and there's like a horse and it has horns. Now, I think this looks pretty cool actually, but it does just kind of feel weird for weirdness's own sake. But I'll reserve my judgment till I learn more about him. Meanwhile, we also meet this lady who is whispering sweet nothings to Torrent.
One of his kind is sure to seek the Elden Ring.
So now I'm confused, because I thought that 5 Tarnished got sent out before, including that shit eater, and so I would have assumed they went to seek the Elden Ring, but sounds like they didn't. They were just off eating shit, I guess. Thankfully, the Maiden and Torrent seems to sense that there's more to Vince Clorthal than just shit eating, and they endorse Vince Clorthal's quest to find the Elden Ring. This doesn't come without a cost, though, because these two are basically using him as a drug mule to bring these flasks over to the Lands Between. Yep, when he woke up, he had these 2 flasks on or in his person. I think it's interesting that the description on the flask says that the person who washed up on this gravesite would have died if it weren't for the flasks, which means either they really think that Vince Clorthal is going to be able to get the Elden Ring, or they just hand these things out like Halloween candy to every Tarnished who gets screamed at by the Grafted Scion. I start to walk around to get my bearings, spot this item up here that's not accessible yet. Another FromSoft staple. Something that's not a FromSoft staple is having the tutorial area be optional. This message tells me the Cave of Knowledge lies below, and then in a shocking twist, a tutorial pops up and pauses the game. This blows my mind because I've been playing the Souls games for 8 years, and I can count on 0 hands how many times those games have been paused. While I ponder the accuracy of that statement, I wander over to this ghost. He seems benevolent enough, and since I'm playing as Vince Clorthal, Keymaster of Gozer from Ghostbusters, this doesn't seem like a big risk. The ghost tells me something about remembering the arts of war and to take that plunge. Gets me wondering, if you don't do this tutorial, can you actually miss something? That would be so like a FromSoft game. Make the tutorial optional, but then have you actually start at a disadvantage. But I'm not going to find that out because I am going to go to do the tutorial. But first, I'm going to attack this little baby tree because it reminds me of the trees from Hollow Knight. Attacking it does nothing, so it's off to the Cave of Knowledge with me. The first thing I learn about are the Sites of Grace, which act as the bonfires in this world. And that's going to be unpleasant to say, so I'm just going to call them bonfires. I noticed that you have the option to pass the time of day when you rest at these, which is cool, but I don't know how to feel about that because when given the option, I opt for daytime exploration in games like this because I am a coward. It's also here that I study the 2 spells I have memorized right now. I have a healing spell, which is what I'm predominantly going to use, and the Assassin's Approach, which silences my footsteps somewhat, which I don't know how much utility I'm going to get out of that. I haven't played this game, so we'll see. The Urgent Heal spell has a standard description. It basically says that the church has high hopes for the Tarnished, so this allows them to keep persevering. The Assassin's Approach, though, is much more interesting. It talks about how this spell was used by the servants of the Two Fingers who used to be assassins for something called the Round Table Hold, and that these assassins targeted Tarnished who strayed from guidance. Now, I get a bunch of shit happen and that everything is shattered and this church is essentially trying to get back in the good graces of the greater will or something. But why can't we fix the world without being hateful zealots who murder those who don't act like us? And I'm sorry if my personal opinion has seeped into this video. If you are a hateful zealot who kills people who are different from you, then this video is probably not for you. With that disclaimer out of the way, it's time to learn how to attack and dodge. And this is really Souls 101, right down to having the first couple enemies be completely unaggressive and the first attacks being utterly pathetic. It still feels like Elden Ring is playing it safe. Again, not a bad thing. I know the grandiose stuff is coming. And it does feel like comfort food. I love Dark Souls, so this is still feeling great. And no sooner have I said Souls 101 that we're introduced to a jump button. And I know Sekiro had jumping mechanics, but man, what a breath of fresh air to be able to jump over knee-high ledges. It was always strange that in previous games, no matter what build you went with, they would inevitably suck at basketball. Now, like clockwork for a Souls tutorial, there's an archer shooting at me that I have to block. And now I regret bringing up the similarities again because here's another major difference. Vince Clorthal grabs some crafting material. I definitely don't know how to feel about this at this point because I generally hate crafting in most RPGs. I think it completely bogs things down. But I gotta see it in action in this game before I pass judgment. With some Roa fruit in hand, I head into this next cavern, and man, I am gonna sound completely schizophrenic because I'm gonna keep going back and forth between, wow, this is new, and wow, this is exactly the same as before, because just like in Dark Souls, here we have a more advanced hollow type enemy, this guy with this big shield and spear. A tutorial helpfully pops up to tell me how to two-hand my weapon, but unfortunately the tutorial doesn't go the extra step of forcing me to read it properly because once the pop-up disappears, I have no idea how to two-hand this weapon. And thus my duel with this enemy takes a full minute. Thankfully the combat always feels great in these games, so I have no issues with this. But I'm going to have to figure out how to two-hand my weapons. Luckily, the controller layout addresses this gap in my knowledge, so it's time to move on. I learn about the lock-on mechanic, and then I take out that crossbow soldier who was attacking me from above. Now this is super basic level design, but I still love that the game presents this enemy in an out-of-reach spot, and then you eventually find yourself at his location. That's like a fundamental tenet of FromSoft level design. I walk to the next guy, and the tutorial tells me how to do special skills. It says to press L2. I do so, and I just swing my shield. That doesn't seem super special. Seems like I'm missing something. If it's anything like Dark Souls 3, I probably need to two-hand that weapon, but I've again forgotten how to do that. After killing him, I try to relearn how to two-hand my weapon, and I learned that you can two-hand a shield. This looks cool, and I'm sure there are going to be builds that are designed around this at some point. At some point, the game's been out for 9 months. Someone has obviously already done this. But anyway, I have no idea how I would make this functional. Next is a tutorial on crouching, which is another new mechanic to the Souls games. I crouch behind this hollow who is digging frantically at the ground or just kind of massaging the mud and kill him. And then it's crouching through the bushes to get to this guy. Stealth is obviously going to be somewhat viable in this game, and I don't know exactly how FromSoft is going to handle it. I just pray to the Church of the Two Fingers that there's not dedicated stealth sections like with stupid AI routines and overly scripted moments. Setting aside my anxiety for a moment, it's time to learn about stance breaking. After totally owning that dirt, I run into this statue or sculpture, and it's apparently a Stake of America. Looks like I can choose to respawn at these if they are nearby. Again, this is something I'll have to see how it works in the game before I really pass judgment. And now we come to a fog door. Could this boss fight be better than the one I just had with the Grafted Scion? The answer is hell no! Generally, I don't have an issue with regular enemies being used as early game bosses. But what kind of boss fight is this? It just teaches you about guard counters, and then that's basically all you do. Like, I barely took any damage from his one hit on me, even though it looked like I got gutted like a fish. Really, the only reason I can see them justifying this being a boss fight is because this guy is called a soldier of Godrick, and they want to emphasize the importance of Godrick to the lore. We saw that the assassination of Godwyn in the intro video sparked a whole shitload of crap. And the name Godfrey is mentioned in the item description of the Crimson Amber Medallion if you choose that as your gift, so I don't think it's a leap to say that Godrick is likely related to Godwyn and Godfrey. And I think this boss fight's intention is to just plant the name Godrick in your head. And now it's time to come clean. I had to re-record the audio of me talking about Godwyn, Godfrey, and Godrick like 8 times because I could not stop getting those names mixed up. This channel may be called Pointless Rewind, but to hell with those names. The only other question I have coming out of this boss fight is, are the guard counters replacing the parry system? Probably not. I mean, the word parry has been plastered on the screen pretty much the entire game so far, so it's likely not gone. I just never actually parry in the Dark Souls games. I suck at it. It's too nerve-wracking for me. But from this fight, the guard counter feels a bit too easy to activate. Another thing I'll have to wait to find out. For now, I walk out of the boss arena and it looks like I'm back at the spot where I first jumped down. There's that item that was tucked away up above, and this makes me think, what about that other item that was way above me right when you wake up in this section? Can I grab that right now? So I rush back to the boss arena and start to look for an illusory wall like in Dark Souls. When I go back to the boss arena, it's freaking huge, so I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that. So I hightail it back to that item, pick it up, and it's a strength gesture? I'm not a PvP player in these games. I never used the gestures in the previous Dark Souls games or Bloodborne. So I don't know how to use this or find it in my inventory if it's even in there, but look! I find something much more useful. The tutorials are in the inventory. This is a freaking godsend. Oh shit, godsend. Is that related to Godfrey, Godwyn, and God? I can't remember the third name. Godfrey, Godwyn, and Godrick. Godwyn. I'm pretty sure I already said that. Godrick! It was Godrick! Like Godrick's Hollow. Holy crap, that took me forever to figure out. And was it really worth it? Because I kind of forget how I got here. So after listening back to what I previously recorded, I repeat that yes, the tutorials being in the inventory is a godsend. It's so useful, especially for things like two-handing or whatever, but this is a great quality of life improvement. Now it's time to hop on back down and go through those doors. I enter into a room where a site of grace... Oh, did I just call it a site of grace? I thought I was going to call them bonfires. But anyway, this room has another gleaming blue item. There's also this pseudo fog door. It's different from the yellowish boss fog door. This one is whitish and feels more like a magical seal. There's also this funky statue. When I try to interact with it, it asks for a stone sword key. This reminds me of the Pharaoh stones from Dark Souls 2, which are used to open Pharaoh's doors. I imagine I will be coming back here at some point to see what's through that fog archway. Anyway, I head over to that blue item, and then a tutorial pops up about cooperative multiplayer, and I couldn't care less. Unless something dramatically changes, I don't plan on engaging in the multiplayer of this game. I did pick up 2 items, a finger severer and a tarnished furled finger. I read up on those descriptions and the description of the tarnished wizened finger, which if you recall, I forgot to look at way at the beginning of this playthrough. Looks like the lore behind these fingers is that prior tarnished are able to help through their fingers if they are preserved properly. I think it's interesting that the description of the finger severer mentions the maidens scorning the use of these. These are used to basically send yourself back to your own world if you've been summoned. Seems like this Church of the Two Fingers is very big on groupthink and hates solo artists. But anyway, it's time to move over towards this classic FromSoft elevator and ride it on up. Open these doors, and it's time to see what all the hubbub is about. You know, I tried a couple of different ways of narrating this moment. Like, I tried raving about all the sights I saw. I tried talking about what an achievement this was, but neither of those really capture my feelings in this moment. I think the main feeling I had when I saw this map, saw this world, was anxiety. Like, you could just sense the amount of choice that is ahead of you, and that freedom is kind of intoxicating, but one of the reasons I didn't pick up Elden Ring until 9 months after its release was that I didn't know if I was going to do good with such a free-form exploration type game. And I'm worried that I'm just going to follow that gleaming light and mainline the main quest. Like, when I play open world games, I like to do a ton of side content as I'm doing the main quest, but if there are no objectives and no checklists, I don't do very well with just exploring for the sake of exploration. And I know that that's this game's jam, so I'm really worried that maybe it's not going to click for me the way it has for everyone else. But even though I am concerned, at least I know there's an obvious thing I can do. I'm going to go rest at this site of grace. A couple of tutorials pop up, one about the guidance of grace and one about the map. And then it's time to talk to this first NPC. And while he's a well of information, he's also kind of a douche.
Unfortunately for you, however, you are maidenless.
Why would this guy say that? Doesn't he know how hard it is to meet people this day and age? Plus, there was this girl who was, I think, clearly into me, and I didn't talk to her, but she was definitely talking me up to one of her friends, so I see potential there. He does provide some good information, though. He gives me 3 reasons why he thinks I suck. And he tells me to head off to Stormvale Castle, which is the home of Godrick the Grafted, and that his name is Vere. So many questions, like why does Vere wear this mask? It seems he's like part of the Church of the Two Fingers that ensures Tarnish follows grace. Does he greet and evaluate everyone who walks out of here? He mentions how Vince Clortho needs an invitation to the Round Table Hold. The Round Table Hold was mentioned in the spell description, where it talked about how the Church had assassins that took out Tarnish that strayed from the path of guidance. And finally, he mentions Godrick the Grafted. Not only does that reinforce the importance of that goddamn god surname prefix, whatever it's called, but is Godrick the Grafted related to the Grafted Scion? I mean, I don't know why I even asked that. Obviously, there is some connection there. But I think there are bigger questions on the horizon. At this point, I don't know if I'm going to head off to Stormvale Castle, which seems like the next step in the main quest, or if I'm going to be able to muster up the courage to do some freeform exploration. That's something that'll be answered next time. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. I love FromSoft games, and this is just a really unique way of experiencing it. Like, I've never pored over lore like I have for this video, and honestly, it's making it a much richer experience than I've had with the previous games. And I can't wait to do more of these videos. So please like and subscribe, and stay tuned.